I have to say how much I miss you all before we get started.
You know.
You know. Great. Well, look, this is a wonderful occasion from my standpoint. I think, coaching is a great profession because it's just like teaching, which is inspiring learning for young people. And I think this gives us an opportunity to recognize folks that have had a tremendous impact on so many lives in their career, also contributed to innovations of the game. Their leadership has been something that has been inspirational to many of us professionally as well as players. So, this is a great opportunity to recognize people who've had great careers and a tremendous impact on our game in so many ways. And it's always fun to be here. So we're excited about the opportunity and, looking forward to, Coach Dye and Coach Cutcliffe, both guys who I have a tremendous amount of respect for, receiving an honor and award that is absolutely something that they more than deserve. So we're happy to be in a position to be able to honor them.
We'll go ahead and open up for questions.
Coach, you mentioned just about Coach Dye and Coach Cutcliffe having an impact on players. With the changing landscape of college sports, football in particular, do you feel like that coaches' roles are changing as far as what their responsibilities are toward their players and how their players view them?
Well, I don't think there's any question when you change the dynamic of, and first of all, I think college football is great, and I do think that, players should have the opportunity to make some money relative to the amount of money that this has become. But I also think you have to take into consideration the fact that there's usually only 2 sports at each school that make money to support 18 to 20 other sports, which creates a lot of opportunity for a lot of other people. So, we have to kind of make a decision. Are we going to be educational institutions that offer opportunities, or are we going to be universities that sponsor professional teams? And I think that's a tough balance, that we're all trying to create. Because you change the dynamic, when I went to college, and the rest of us probably went to college, we went to college to create value for our future. That was the whole goal, the whole purpose of what we were trying to accomplish and what we're trying to do. And now we've sort of created a paradigm where lots of guys are making decisions about where they go to college and how much they transfer based on how much money they can make. And I think when you change that paradigm, you change the whole sport in terms of how do you coach, how do you develop. Be a great question to ask NFL coaches because they have a different perspective on how players are coming to them now, which is a reflection on how they developed while they were in college. So I do think it's a different dynamic, but I think that like all obstacles, we all have to be really resourceful in how do we come up with ways to get players to develop and do the things they need to do that are going to create value for their future, not only in football, but as people and also as students in terms of career development. And, we don't hear a lot about guys that transfer and don't graduate or guys that transfer and can't major in what they want to major in and be eligible so they major in something else. So, this is not all a positive thing. So, but I think we need to make it one because I think college football is, a great, there's so much fan interest, there's so much enthusiasm for it, there's so many people that relate to it, and there's so many people that can take advantage of opportunities that we all need to never give up on it and try to make it something that works for everybody.
What was your advice for Bill Belichick when he decided to coach college football?
I didn't give him any advice. He's my mentor. He gives me advice. I don't give him advice.
For the college game as opposed to being in the pros.
Well, I didn't really, discuss it with him, but I think, I don't think there's a whole lot of difference between coaching a college player and coaching a player in the NFL. If you're a good coach, which Bill is, and players see that you're teaching them You know, in college, their motivation was they wanted to get to the NFL. In the NFL, they wanted to extend their careers, play longer, make more money. So the motivation was a little different. But if you were a good coach, the players responded to you exactly the same way. And, you know, Bill is a really good coach, and I think the players will respond to him really well. Now, anytime you have a change, you know, you have a lot of obstacles to overcome because of the changes and what the changes create in terms of players leaving, new players coming in. So it's a little harder to get your feet on the ground in terms of making an immediate impact than maybe it was before all this was the way it is.
Coach, when you had mentioned teaching, so did Coach Cutcliffe. When you had a player that you were working with get it and start making those positive steps, how did that make you feel?
Oh, great. You know, I think that's a lot of positive reinforcement when, you know, my whole goal as a coach was how much value can you create for a guy's future in terms of how he developed as a person, how he did in school in terms of career development, graduating, as well as, you know, what kind of progress is he making and how's he developing as a player. So when you had guys that made positive steps in those directions, you know, it was very self-gratifying because that's exactly what you were trying to get people to do. And, you know, sometimes you had to make them do things that they didn't want to do that was really in their best interest if they did it. And at the time they didn't like it, but just like all of us always went back to our parents when we cussed them under our breath and they made us do something we didn't like when we were growing up. And then all of a sudden when we got old enough to realize, wow, thanks for doing that, Dad. You know, I mean, it's the same thing.
With Coach Dye and Coach Cutcliffe honoring them today, can you describe the impact they've had on the game and what it means to honor these two here today?
Yeah, well, I think both guys were, you know, Coach Dye was somebody that I always respected and looked up to because he stood for a lot of the things that we always stood for in terms of how he developed players, the toughness. You know, he won a certain way, and I think he won the right way. And, you know, one thing that I would love to say about Coach Dye is, you know, being in Alabama, you have Alabama and Auburn folks, but every time I ever came across Coach Dye, you know, there was always a mutual respect that he always afforded to me, even though I was a coach at Alabama, and because he respected the profession and what you were trying to do, and I respected him for what he had accomplished and what he'd done and how he continued to impact people. I think Coach Cutcliffe is probably one of the best quarterback teachers and one of the best offensive coaches. I actually tried to hire him at Alabama once because of that respect that I had for him. And, you know, sometimes I think, you know, he did a fantastic job at the schools of Ole Miss and Duke, which not necessarily Texas, Alabama, Ohio State. And I think sometimes, you know, our record, because we had better opportunities, reflects that. But as a teacher and a coach and a developer of people, I don't think it gets any better than Coach Cutcliffe and, you know, Coach Dye as well.
Coach, your longtime assistant, Scott Cochran, has taken on a new challenge over at West Alabama as a head coach. I wonder if you would share any thoughts about that relative to Coach Cochran and relative to the challenges and opportunities that face any head coach at any.
You know, I think that, you know, you always look at the level and the expectation of what you can accomplish at each level when you take a job. But I think the people he's going to play against are in very similar situations to him. So he's going to have an opportunity to be successful. I know he has a lot of our former players on his staff, so I'm really watching and looking forward to rooting for them and hope they all have a chance to be successful and can launch their careers, not only him as a head coach, but also you know, some of the assistants who played for us at Alabama. But, and I think, you know, Coach Cochran's enthusiasm, his knowledge, what he's learned through the years, what he's had to overcome, are all going to be things that are beneficial to him helping develop people in his organization.
Final question?
What's a moment that you had with Coach early on that shaped the way that your career went?
Which coach?
Was maybe something that was
I had so many good mentors. You know, Don James was my college coach, and a lot of the things that we did for 50 years were things that he did in terms of the total philosophy of developing the total person, student, and player, as well as how we recruited players. I remember the last conversation I had with Coach James. He was in the hospital, had pancreatic cancer, didn't have long to live, and it was a Monday in the fall, and we were practicing that day. And we used to do progressives when I was a player, you know, up 10, back 20, 30, 40, all the way up to 100. And I said, Coach James, I know it's been a long time, but we're doing progressives today because it's Monday. So, you know, George Perlis was a great mentor at Michigan State, who was the first person who gave me a responsibility of being a coordinator. You know, Bill Belichick, probably I learned more from him in terms of total organization, as well as how to define the expectation for everybody in the organization. So, I mean, I've just been so fortunate to have so many good mentors. I mean, my high school coach was, you know, a great mentor. My first coaching lesson I learned from my high school coach. I was a sophomore in college, in high school, playing quarterback, and we were playing at Masontown Valley. You had to walk through the graveyard to get to the playing field, and we had to win this game to get in the playoffs. And we got behind 18-0, and we came back in the second half, and we had 18-12. We got the ball to go 2 minutes, and I called the plays. I was 15 years old. And we go down, and it's 4th and 12 at the 25-yard line. And he calls our last time out. And I was relieved because the last guy in our town turned the lights out. Everybody went to the game. So the whole community is there, and I'm thinking, I got to call this play now on 4th and 12 to win the game. And he calls me over the sidelines. He called me Young Nicky. He said, Young Nicky, what do you think? And I said, I think you should call this play. That's what I think. And he said, well, you got the fastest guy in the state playing left halfback and a 3-time All-State guy playing split end. I don't care what play you call, one of the two of them need to get the ball. So I called 26 crossfire pass, which is play action on 4th and 12. Not very smart, right? Faked it to the fastest guy, threw it to the other guy for a touchdown, and we won 19-18. So after the game, he says, when you're in a critical situation in a game, don't think of plays, think of players. So that was my first coaching lesson, even though God knows I didn't have any aspirations of being a coach at that time. But anyway, I just wanted to get out of